Hi there. In this lesson, you are going to learn about the linear inequalities and its properties. You will also learn how to solve the linear equations. So let's begin. Numbers and inequality. In order to understand how the inequality works, what I'm going to do, I'm going to consider some numbers and then we will establish a relationship between those two numbers. So I'm considering two numbers 3 and 5. Now the question is how these two numbers are related. And we know that these two numbers are not the same. So basically one number, which is 5, is greater than another number. Now the question is, how do we represent that relationship? And to answer that question, what we're going to do, we are going to use the inequality. So we will write 3 is less than 5, or in other words, we can say that 5 is greater than 3. And this symbol is known as inequality. Now, in order to understand the inequality further, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a number on both sides. So let's add 2 on both sides. And if we do that, I will write 2 plus 3 is less than 2 plus 5. 2 plus 3 is 5 and 2 plus 5 is 7. So I will write 5 is less than 7. Now let's consider another pair of number, and my number is 4 and 7. Now again, how these numbers are related? It's easy to find the relation between these two numbers because we know that 7 is greater than 4. So I can write 4 is less than 7, or I can also say that 7 is greater than 4. Now, instead of adding, what I'm going to do, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And if I do that, I will write 4 minus 2 is less than 7 minus 2. We know that 4 minus 2 is 2 and 7 minus 2 is 5. So we'll write 2 is less than 5. Now, if you look at these two pair of numbers, you can definitely come up with a rule. And the rule will state that adding or subtracting same numbers on both sides does not change inequality. In other words, we can say that if we have two inequality and we are adding the same number or subtracting the same number from both sides of the inequality, then that does not change the overall value of the inequality. Now let's consider another pair of numbers. So my another pair of number is 6 and 10. Now what is the relation between these two numbers? We know that 10 is greater than 6. So I'm going to use an inequality. So I will write 6 is less than 10, or I can also say 10 is greater than 6. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to multiply this set of number by a number which is 2. So if I do that, I will write 2 times 6 is less than 2 times 10. And we know that 2 times 6 is 12 and then 2 times 10 is 20. So we'll write 12 is less than 20. Now let's consider another pair, and my another pair is 8 and 12. Now let's establish the relation. So we know that 12 is greater than 8. So I will write 8 is less than 12. Now instead of multiplying, what I'm going to do, I'm going to divide both sides by one number. So basically I'm dividing by same number on both sides. And if I do that, I will write 8 over 2. So basically I'm considering 2. So I will write 8 over 2 is less than 12 over 2. And 8 over 2 is basically 4 is less than 12 over 2 is 6. So our final relationship is 4 is less than 6. If you look closely at these two relationships or these two set of numbers, you can come up with a rule which states that multiplication or division by same non-zero numbers on both sides does not change inequality. Now let's consider another example. So my number is 3 and 5, and let's establish the relationship, and the relationship is basically 3 is less than 5. Now what I'm going to do, instead of multiplying by a positive number, I'm going to multiply by a negative number. So if I multiply by a negative number, I will write negative 2 times 3 and negative 2 times 5. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 and negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Now the question is, how these two numbers are related now? And we know that negative 6 is greater than negative 10. So we will use an inequality which will read as negative 6 is greater than negative 10. Now the question is, did you understand how we can say that negative 6 is greater than negative 10? I think we need to consider another approach. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to represent these numbers on a number line. So this is my number line, this is my origin, and all the numbers on the left side of origin is a negative number, and the numbers on the right side of origin is positive. Now what I need to do, I need to find my number negative 6. So if you look at the number line, here is negative 6. Now I need to find number negative 10. And if you keep moving on the left, you will find number 10 over here, which is basically negative 10. Now, if you look at these 2 points on the number line, so if you look at negative 10 is farthest from origin than negative 6. So basically, negative 6 is very close to origin, which is 0, then negative 10. So negative 6 is greater than negative 10. And this is how we can understand the inequality using the number line. Now let's consider another pair of number. So my pair of number is 6 and 10, and we know that 10 is greater than 6. Now let's divide this number on both sides by a negative number. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. So I will write 6 over negative 2 and 10 over negative 2. 6 over negative 2 is negative 3 and 10 over negative 2 is negative 5. Now, can you guess which number is greater? Yes, you are right. Negative 3 is greater than negative 5. So I'm going to use the inequality. And if we use this inequality, we will read as negative 3 is greater than negative 5. Now let's try to understand graphically. So this is my number line where this is my origin. Every number on the right of origin is positive and every number on the left of origin is negative. We need to find negative 3 and negative 5. So this is my negative 5 and this is my negative 3. You can see negative 3 is closer than negative 5 with 0. So basically, you can easily say that negative 3 is greater than negative 5. And this is how we will use number line to represent the inequality or define the inequality. So now the last thing we need to consider, what kind of rule did we come up with? Now let's look at closely. We started with 5 is greater than negative 3, and when we multiply by a negative sign, then the inequality changes. In the same way, when we divide by a negative sign, inequality changes again. So what kind of statement we can make? So basically we can say that inequalities reverse or flip when multiplied or divided by a negative number. In other words, we can say that if we have an inequality and we multiply the inequality by a negative number or divide by a negative number, then that inequality reverse or that inequality changes and you flip the inequality to represent the actual multiplication. And this is how we will establish the relationship between numbers and inequalities.